Today we're going to speak about the technology that tries to fill the trust gap between individuals and institutions. We're going to speak about blockchain technology. In our first episode, we're going to speak about application of blockchain technology for international trade, supply chain management, and food traceability. And for those of you who doesn't know the basics of the blockchain technology, we'll have the episode 2, which will provide more details about the core of the technology and how it works. And I have the privilege to have 2 guests today representing public and private sector, Gary Loh and Raymond Yeh. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Gary, would you like to start with an introduction?
Yeah, thanks, Armen. Thank you very much. Hi, my name is Gary, and I'm founder and CEO of a company called DiMuto. It started not very long ago, last year actually, and the question people ask is, why would I want to start a company in technology? I guess the main purpose was actually I've been 15 years in finance and 10 years in basically supply chain management. We were running farms and selling fruits and vegetables throughout the world. And one of the biggest pain points of running this business was basically the lack of visibility. And this was one of the issues of trying to combine the understanding of the trade and understanding technology to combine it in such a way that can actually get the results we need, and making sure that we can have a more holistic approach to solving a problem. And that's how DiMuto was formed, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Gary. Raymond?
Right. My name is Raymond. I'm a software engineer with GovTech. Right now, one of the products that I work on is Trade Trust. So Trade Trust is actually a product for document digitalization, right? It forms the underlying framework on what makes a document true. And the thing is, when we talk about trade, 20% of the entire cost of trade actually goes to documentation themselves in document processing and also document errors as well. So right now, my agency has been working with a couple of government agencies around the world, such as the Port of Rotterdam and as well as the Australian Port Border Force, right, to look at how we can use this technology to facilitate trades between the different countries. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. You actually mentioned the things, but I want our audience to get a better grasp of international trade, because obviously when we look and trace back a few decades, we see that there is a lot of digitalization taking place, and it obviously increased the efficiency of the international trade and supply management in general. So how blockchain technology disrupts international trade?
Okay, so I think today we have very good representation of how blockchain can actually help international trade, right? One of the ways is indeed what I said earlier, which is trade documentations. We not only want to make it more efficient and effective, like we want to reduce the cost of trade by allowing the documents to be digitalized, the transfers of these documents to be digitalized. Now, if you think of how shipment works right now, it's quite silly. When I send a cargo via ship out, I actually have to take the corresponding bill, right, and send it via air to another country. Well, what if I lose this? And there's a lot of problem when we talk about sending this physical bill of lading across the country, because sometimes we take multiple hops between other countries first before it reaches the final destination, right? So one way that we want to do is to make paper process a bit more efficient. And not just that, we want to be able to trace paper trail along the entire supply chain itself, right? And be able to make sure that all the documents are checked that it has not been tampered with and the provenance can be validated. The other part of it, I think, it's also very important in supply chain and traceability, food traceability, is in the ability for us to have information as our goods travel along the supply chain. And I think Gary perhaps could give a very good overview on how perhaps IoT and blockchain can come together to actually provide a lot more insights in how this group move. Would you like to know?
Actually, that's a good point, but still, I'm a bit confused, and I'm sure some of our audience, and previously when we talked to the governments and private sector operators, they still have that misunderstanding of the use of the technology, because they say, why don't we use just traditional, digital, very efficient technologies? What would be the value added of the blockchain? Why shall I invest into the blockchain? Gary, from your experience from the commercial perspective, why shall government or public institution, public or private institutions really invest in the blockchain?
I think taking from where Raymond left off, I think it's very clear what he was expressing, the value proposition. I think where the commercial value makes a lot of sense is a lot of the businesses all will have your own ERP system or your own data storage system. And if you have a different data system, then whose data systems do you trust? I think the blockchain in commercial terms creates what we call the custody of truth, where you put the information that you want to share so that there is a custody that no one can change. And in that sense, it's really one where you can really use it without opening up your own database to everyone so that you have to share everything. It becomes something that's a bit more selective. So I think the blockchain in this perspective has actually become the custody of truth. And I think the second part that the blockchain really helps businesses is the burden of proof. I mean, like what Raymond says, right? If you put all this document in your own database, and if something goes wrong, you have to go back to your database and pull it out, whatever forms, and then try to show people that this is what it is. But once you use the blockchain in a manner where the custody of truth is there, and then now the burden of proof is one where you don't have to do very difficult physical demonstration of what is this that you're demonstrating, but actually something that's digital, I think you can actually get a lot of commercial value.
Okay, Gary, good point. But we've learned, at least during the last few decades, that the big value of the digitalization is that those companies that owns data, they can really target their products, target their services. In other words, that's a value of the 21st century. Why shall private sector or public sector institutions give up centralization and migrate into the decentralization?
I think that's a very good question. I think that's a misconception. I think maybe that's where we need to really address this, because just because you put something onto the internet and it's now so-called public, actually what you did put onto the internet is a hash, which is a bunch of numbers that basically tells you that this was done. It's not posting everything for everyone else to see, right? So, and I think that's kind of like where a lot of the misconception is. There are certain data that if businesses do not want to share, there's ability to not share it. But yet, if you need to share it, that's where you can actually open it up. And I think that's kind of like where the value is, to not suddenly think that, oh, going onto the blockchain and putting it onto the public means I'm opening up everything and my secret sauce is going to basically be shown. I think that's a bit of a misconception. I think there is ways, and that's why there are developments in private blockchain, there are public blockchain, and different systems and consortiums that are keeping, because data, like you say, is really key.
We're actually going to go back to that public and permissioned blockchain, private blockchain. Obviously, that's an interesting topic to discuss. In particular, I think that's interesting in a perspective that we have the public institution representative, private institution representative. But okay, Raymond, what is your perspective on that question? Because you're representing the public institution. Why shall governments give up this centralization and migrate basically to the decentralized solutions?
Right. So if we understand it from a government point of view, right? In Singapore, we kind of enjoy the trust between our citizens and the government, but we can't say the same for all the other countries. Not all citizens of their country naturally trust the government, right? And more importantly, governments between themselves may not necessarily trust each other. So let me take an example out of this, right? Let's say country A, right, and country B, right? Country A, country B. And we decided that we are going to work on something together. We have our existing ERP solutions. And for the longest time, we work on bilateral agreements right? And we have data standards between the two of us to transmit data, trade data between these two countries. And all is good until we decide that we want to have a third player in this ecosystem. Let's say we have A, we have B, we have C, right? And now, when we want to invite player C into this game, we have the problem. The traditional approach will be country A will have to agree with country C that we have this relationship, and country B will separately have a relationship with country C, right? The other way that blockchain allows you to do it is that both of us, right, we form some sort of a governance, right, in which both of us finally come to a consensus and say, we both agree that country C joined this game with us. And all is good. Now we have A, B, and C in this game. Now, if country D were to join this game, right, it becomes a bit more complex if country D has a bad trade relationship with one of us in there. It could be A, B, or C, right? One of these kids in the playground will say that I don't really want to play with that person. And now you have problem, right? In the centralized world, right, you could probably have this country talk to just one or two players, right? And that is also a good solution as well in the centralized world. But here's what the decentralized world brings you, right? In a decentralized world, suppose that this method of governance, you gave it up, right? That you did not have a board or an international government of some sort, but rather the method of governance is actually just a set of rules. So long as you follow this set of rules, you're allowed to play in this game. This entire network is open for you to join. Any country, any players, whether you are a big sovereign player or you're a simple trader with just like a couple of millions of annual turnover, you can simply be plugged into this system and no one can ask you to leave. And that is what the decentralized world actually bring into this. It levels up the playing field so that everyone can be connected to everyone. And nobody can actually come in to bully someone and say that, no, you are not allowed to play in this global playground. And that's what the true value of a decentralized world brings.
So basically that means that if this country A, B, C, D can agree upon some particular rules in the first place, then basically we have a new model of the cooperation which is based on the specific rules.
Correct.
Right? Gary, I see that you want to add something.
Thank you. I actually have a very huge reaction to this because that's sort of where the problems lie. Because I come from a business world, right? If you imagine trying to get 4 people to agree, even in the same room, you will find that there is really a huge problem. Don't talk about countries, right? So there is where we feel from a business perspective, there's a lot of theoretical discussion. And yes, the ultimate goal is very clear. The goodness that can be achieved, I think we all can agree. But these are real problems that we are facing today. Your fruits are growing on your trees, your pigs are growing, and you are doing cows and you're doing avocados. You have to move when they move. And you're going to different countries at the same time. We don't have the luxury to wait for everybody to come to a consensus first and then things starting to move. So there are a lot of practical things that's going on the ground, and we need to be able to adapt because A may have a say, C may want to have a say, and D may have a say, but unfortunately, the harvest is going on, right? Things are moving.
Yeah, that's a good point, but you're representing a company which is, if I'm not mistaken, you're using the permissioned blockchain technology, right?
Some part permission, some part
perfect.
Public.
So you're advocating now that the thing that Raymond mentioned is basically the value of the blockchain technology,
That's right.
One of the primary values that it creates. At the same time, you still kind of some of the services that you're providing are still permissioned or private blockchain.
That's right.
Meaning that it's not that decentralized, right? So why haven't you decided to go for the full decentralization?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question because certain things to me does not make sense, right? So blockchain as a technology, like what Raymond has very succinctly described. The other example I asked is like, do you need to ask the whole world, do you agree that this is an avocado? I don't need to go to the public blockchain to do this, right?
Okay.
But the example that I gave is that if I paid for that, then I may have to go to a public exchange because I cannot do it in the private sector. Or when it comes to tokens, for example, then definitely the more. So it depends on the transaction that we are doing. And we just have to basically be realistic about it. Because what Raymond suggested about earlier about documents as one part of trade is only one part of trade. Because the real situation for us is not just linking the documents, but we have to think about the product and then the quality of the product. Mm-hmm. And then we have to, like what Raymond was talking about IoT, and we have to deal with so many other things that actually make it work. So are we trying to use technology to make sure that there's no error at all? Then maybe I think that's a bit too lofty. You can use AI to add on to this to make it reduce the error, but I don't think you can start off today and say, let's have a technology that's going to make sure everything's going to work. So where we think is that actually adapting the technology to your use case and then have a couple of use cases out there so that people can see, oh, these are some examples where, oh, you use this for public, you use this for private. And then sometimes they can coexist, and there will be weaknesses and there will be pros and certain cons, of course. And then, but yet, at the end of the day, for the business owner, what is the end result? That the cost and the benefit actually is going to basically be higher. The end benefit to society is a lot higher. And then the goodness that you achieve for the community is higher. I think that's really what technology really can do.
Your argument is pretty convincing to me, but just because we have a super expert with us, what would be your take from the government perspective on the private sector, which is really justifying its position that we still cannot be kind of fully decentralized? Do you like this argument in general, and what's your take on that?
Right. I don't think I'm here to say that the government says that the public blockchain is the way to go. I don't think that is the stance I'm trying to put forth, right? But I'll have a very strong case for the use of public blockchain, right? Simply because it gives you a guarantee, right, that private blockchain certainly couldn't. Why? Right? When we talk about a public blockchain, right, such as Ethereum, versus a private permission one that is run by one or two companies, we are talking about different level of security, right? And this fundamentally will affect whether company will choose to trust this technology at all. Why do I say that? Blockchains, by nature, right? They are probabilistic in consensus, right? When we say this is a version of the truth on the blockchain, we can only say it is probably truthful, and that we cannot alter the state. We probably could not alter the state. Can we actually alter the state? The answer is yes, all right? If we talk about mining, right, in a public blockchain such as Ethereum, can I rewrite the state such that certain transactions in the millions of dollars did not happen? I can rewrite it from a previous block and have a different ledger at the end of the day. But to do so, I actually need to have more computational power than the rest of the world. And I have to sustain it for a very elongated period of time. And these are amounts in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, if we look at the private blockchains in general, these are run by usually one company, two company, maybe three company. The problem with this is that your guarantee on the security of the blockchain or the data or the history or the records that goes onto this becomes the value of these three or four companies or one company. If I could buy this company for $50 million, I essentially can change the record for $50 million, right? And this is actually the fundamental security model when we talk about blockchain. There is no absolute security. It's always tagged with a value, right? And that's just the security model of public versus private blockchains. The other model that we talk about is what blockchain really is. When we talk about blockchain, right, it does not tell you that the data on the blockchain are accurate. Today, if I take a picture of a yellow color avocado, because I photoshopped it and put it on the blockchain, it will be a yellow color avocado on the blockchain. The blockchain does not have the intelligence to know that avocado should be green, not yellow, right? In no circumstance, it should be in the yellow format, And that is what blockchain really is. To fully utilize this blockchain, right, we actually need to supplement it with data and different players. So this is how it goes. When you have a blockchain, what we are really trying to harvest the value out of this blockchain is the ability for different sets of data to corroborate with one another, right? So let's take, for instance, in a supply chain management, very often we have the cold chain, where if I'm transporting, say, tuna, right, perhaps I have to ensure that throughout the entire journey where my tuna moves from source to destination, the cold chain cannot be, the temperature of the container cannot be above negative 15 degrees Celsius, right? And so what do? You implant IoT devices into this cargo truck, and then you say that every 1 minute or half a minute, I'm sending temperature sensor data onto the blockchain live as it goes along the supply chain. Does that mean that the information is always accurate? Not really, because sensors can have problem, internet can go down, right? But what you can have is that if you put 20 different sensors into the container, right, and 18 of them tell you that it is negative 20 degrees Celsius, and 2 of them tells you that it's 30 degrees Celsius, just like right in Singapore, bright and warm in Singapore. What would you choose to believe, right? You choose to believe that the story would be the cold chain is not broken. I probably have 2 sensors that were broken, right? And with this information being timely uploaded onto the blockchain, right, we have the guarantee that neither the producer, nor the supplier, nor the people transporting the goods, right, can change the fact, right, that has already been uploaded. And it makes it more powerful if you are able to obtain information from different sources, not just, let's say, this certain manufacturer of sensor over there, but at, let's say, this pot, it also measures this temperature again. You are able to corroborate this information with information you have previously. And this is the true value of blockchain, and it's not unique to private blockchain. The thing is, you can replicate the whole thing, the uploading of sensor data whenever and wherever in public blockchain as well. But of course, I think that will be the next argument is the public blockchain ready for all this?
Actually, that's my very next question. But before going into that question, I just like to grab your attention in terms of when I'm trying to really create some kind of a discussion between public and private sector. You can't really do that because, and I think that's one of the success of the Singapore's model, a close collaboration between government and private sector. So it's obvious from our discussion. But my next question actually was about that. Maybe I can start with Gary, with you. What's the capacity of the blockchain? In other words, what's the speed limitation and cost limitation of introduction of the blockchain? Because from what I get from this conversation is that there is technology. This technology is applicable to improve international trade, supply chain management system, and most importantly, really improve the food traceability, something that we really want to achieve, right? I, as a consumer, want to go to supermarket, put my phone on the product, and really know where this product comes from, what type of fertilizer was used in the production, et cetera, et cetera. And it seems that we have the solution. So what are the limitations of that? Speed, cost, scalability, because we obviously want to scale it up, right? Gary, what's your take on that?
I think whatever Raymond has described is good, and I think whatever he described is exactly what we're doing. So our information, we are actually using Trade Trust. You can verify your document. So we're already implementing this in our system, and all our information is actually going on to the Ethereum, right? So, but do you need to have every single transaction to go onto the Ethereum? Do you have to pay gas costs of like data loggers every minute, and the latest transaction is $300 just to do a transfer. Now, then there lies a bit of a theoretical value and the reality of a cost, right? And when we talk about, Raymond talks as though, he's definitely familiar with the trade. But, when you are really trying to move thousands of containers like we do, right? I'm really moving avocados and I'm moving tunas and I'm moving meat. And it's thousands of containers and many, many data loggers. Then you're talking about very costly data if you're saying that every single data is the truth. Then the truth has a cost. And the cost is one where, back to your point, do consumers really pay for traceability? You want to know fertilizers, you want to know where it is from. But you want to pay?
Sorry, but consumer pays for the marketing, for the packaging, for the labeling, for this billions of marketing campaign. And now there is a solution that, I don't need to hear the advertisement about this particular variety of the product, because what I need, I want to put my phone on the product, and then I read what is this product really. And then there are many also feedback solutions that you read the feedback at the end of the day. So I think the cost of the application, in this case of the blockchain, is lower. But is it scalable, the technology as it is?
I think the point to your point is that's my point, right? You can't charge more, but you can actually make the inefficiency go away. Therefore, that's where the savings is. And that's how we actually pay for the technology.
Look, Company A spending billions of dollars on advertisement. But I'm as a consumer, and most of the consumers around the world now knows that they don't need to hear the advertisement and believe the advertisement, because there is a simple technology of reading. And they started giving up their advertisement cost and integrating this cost, and basically that lowers the cost of the production, right? So why don't we really move ahead, say, maybe I'll switch to Raymond. Sorry, Gary, because why don't governments in this case adopt the regulation and say, guys, okay, starting from year 2022 or 2025, all products that are produced or imported to Singapore or country X or country Y has to have the traceable labeling on the product. So what's the impediment? I really want to understand what's the problem of scaling up the technology if technology is ready.
But can the government do that? 95% of our products are imported. And if Singapore says, you must do what they say, do the rest of the world agree?
I don't know, but maybe there are producers that agree, right? So what's your take?
Yeah.
Maybe, you said 2030. So the companies around the world can adopt, because Singapore is a good market and people want to sell their products here, right? And it's also an example of integrating the new technologies that everyone is striving to achieve. And in addition to this helps smaller and medium-sized businesses to better integrate into the global value chain, because at the moment, they're inferior in terms of their position in the competitiveness, right?
But this example is in the private sector. And before you answer it, just use IBM and Walmart. Walmart is a huge market, and he says exactly 3 years ago, anybody who wants to send this thing, you must use a blockchain system.
But is it fair just to say that, tomorrow everyone who wants to use
but then that's the point. Even though they want to supply, but today, 3 years later, how many people really got on? Even though he was, like you said, the government's point of view.
In other words, if I say that I sell billions of the products in Walmart, and Walmart requests something that I need to invest a few millions, I think at least I need to consider that, right? Raymond, what's your take on that from the government perspective?
Right. I don't think I can answer this at the policy level, but I can put on an economics, hat and look at this question, right? If we just look at slapping on additional tax tariffs and essentially standards, right? It's to the producers. Immediately, this is what they see. They see additional cost, right? And being Singapore, we are one of the smallest country that really embraces free trade. And it's one of those areas that I don't think we really want to get into. And really to exporter, Singapore is not that big a market.
Thank you. I think that's exactly it.
Okay. Okay,
But
let
I think
me-
I
let
can
me
get to the
reframe.
scale part of things.
Sorry, yeah,
Right,
that's
because
exactly
I'm a
what I want.
technologist,
Scale
right?
up.
I can talk about the scale of...
Imagine there is a big country
Yeah.
that has the ability to say, okay, I'm going to have this traceable product requirements, and if you want to earn billions of dollars on our market, you have to follow these rules. Can this technology
Right.
scale up? Because I think that there is a other cause behind the technology.
Sure.
I mean, the speed, obviously, I was reading an article about the speed of the cryptocurrencies in comparison to other systems of the international finance, like
Swift.
transfer,
Yeah.
Swift system. So, and it says that the system is slow. So if we integrate blockchain into the international trade, then obviously probably we need a speed. Do we have that issue at the moment?
Right. I think I can take that
Wait,
question.
wait,
That's
wait,
great.
but that part, let's be very, I think we have to break it down because what you link two things here. I think we have to be clear. One is the goods movement. The other one is the transaction movement. You are right about the transaction movement.
Okay.
But goods movement don't move like the way money moves, right? So it doesn't go by split second because it takes time to move certain things. So
But blockchain applied in both cases, right?
yeah, so that's why in terms of what you just said, it becomes certain things that we have to sort of like look at it, right? The microseconds in trade doesn't need to be so important. Speed in blockchain is not that critical when you're moving goods. But when you're moving money, it is in microseconds, right? So I think that's kind of like where we need to be a bit clearer. So scaling onto the
So
trade.
you say that, for example, I'm sending the product and actually there is no problem in terms of the maintaining the product flow.
Yes.
But the guy who sent that product may get their money in 2024 because the other process, which is linked to the paperwork, is very slow.
No, I think what I'm saying is that if you take the goods in 30 days, the goods arrive, and then you have to pay today, then you have to do it in microseconds, right? So there's two different uses of the blockchain. The movement of the goods throughout the 30 days.
So the system is capable. If international community stands up and say, every country puts the requirement of have the traceability, basically blockchain-backed traceability system, then the technology is really here to help with that. Raymond,
but
maybe...
would it be consumer rather than government? I think if the consumer takes the lead,
yes, I can think about the consumer, but sometimes you have to have that also top-down approach because maybe consumers are not that. You imagine that tomorrow every consumer around the world, disregarding their, I would say, there is a consumer sophistication level, right? With all type of the consumer sophistication level, just say, tomorrow I want to trace the products.
But how much?
But at the same time, when you have we're speaking about how governments also help to integrate technologies into the public sector, right? Why don't we think about government to be the driving force behind that? Because government wants to achieve food safety, government wants to achieve traceability of the product, government wants to minimize the food fraud and many other things that we're going to speak about, those kind of things. And why consumers should be the driving force behind it.
I feel strongly about this, right? Because I think for us, the public has to say, because you don't need, okay, let me put it this way, you don't need...
Public doesn't understand blockchain technology.
No, not the technology, but the requirements are the same. Do you feed your children with milk that has tainted? You won't. Will you basically not have traceability without knowing where this thing comes from?
But consumer believes that whatever is written on the packaging is absolutely true. And packaging is so beautiful, right?
Yeah.
There is only a few people that can read behind the label. I'm not saying that the food system is bad, but in some cases we have the issues, right?
Yes.
Gary, let maybe kind of switch back to the government.
Yes, we have the government to say something, right?
Right, I think your first question is really on the scale, right? I actually beg to differ in whether blockchain is ready for this kind of global level kind of consumption. As we speak now, right, the biggest programmable blockchain, Ethereum right now, is at 95% capacity without trade ongoing on it. Do I think that it can support trade activities? At this moment in time, the really direct answer is no, it is not ready, right? We are talking about, say, 7 transactions a second globally, right? And that is scary. Scaringly slow for everyone, right? But are there solutions right now, or in near future that allow us to do that? The answer is yes, right? Because if we look at technology implementer, when we look at startups building off the blockchain as we know it, and when I say blockchain, I tend to refer to Ethereum as the global computer, as the golden standard for a blockchain that supports computing, right? When we look at startups or companies implementing technologies on top of this blockchain, right, it would be wasteful if they try to actually send one transaction in at a time. Gary is correct. Every transaction is going to cost you maybe $300 right now. I have sent a couple of transactions yesterday. It's $85 US dollars per transaction, right? And that is just simply moving
how you
money
handle
around.
your system now?
We do it once a day now.
Right?
Okay.
So, and you heard him, right? Once a day. So what's the technology that allows you to do something once a day and still have the guarantee of the blockchain, like I mentioned, hundreds of millions of dollars of guarantee that you cannot alter the history of the blockchain? The answer is actually what we call a layer 2 solutions, right? In the Ethereum ecosystem right now, there are a couple of layer 2 solutions, right? And these are smart contracts that actually allows you to compress transactions together, right? Take for instance, if I want to send $1 million from me to you, right? And he is the intermediary. I can send him $1 million, he can send you $1 million, right? If we've gone this way, it's 2 transactions.
And there is a transaction cost, most
correct.
probably, right?
So remember that every transaction has a transaction cost attached to it.
Yeah.
But if we have a layer 2 solution that actually allow us to compress this and only update the final state. The final state is in fact minus $1 million, no change, plus $1 million. Essentially, I'm compressing it from 2 transactions down to 1 transaction. I'm reducing the cost by half, right? These are layer 2 solutions.
Is proof of stake
No,
is a
not
layer
yet.
2 solution?
No.
Okay.
Let's not go
Wait,
there
let's
yet.
go back to this point, right? Where I'm saying is that from a commercial perspective is that 1 million must be worth something. If you are moving 1 million durians to China and he's paying you the $1 million, that's what we are looking at the problem. We're saying solve the problem at the goods from Thailand to China, and that's in the blockchain. But when I want to pay that $1 million today, I don't need to go to use the blockchain. I can still use my SWIFT, I can use my bank account, and my bank is actually using it today. But there's 2 different purposes as a commercial reason. The commercial reason is I need to pay for my goods, but I need to make sure the goods arrive according to the specification I bought. So where DiMuto was basically set up to do was first tackle the problem of the goods that you move. If you can confirm that the goods arrive, then we tackle the second problem. It's how you want to pay for it. Let's just make sure that this is a conjoined twins of a problem. Trade is a conjoined twins. But you can't just say that this is basically one where one solution can solve everything else, right? There's a couple of issues that you need to do. And that's kind of like the way we approach. That you say some things, the goods must go on the blockchain, doesn't have to go through massive transaction.
Goods, documents, money, right?
Goods, document, and then money.
Yeah.
Because money goes this way, the goods and the document goes this way.
Oh, okay.
Right? So this is this thing, but it's actually what we're looking at. But you're going this way, you take all the blockchain information and all the IoT that goes along with it. But then when you come to transaction in itself and speed and money coming this way, well, that's where we actually adjusted both. But where we had the problem is monies were moving without knowing exactly what was actually received. People were using document purely, right? And they were talking to us in many things like saving the time of efficiencies. But to us, I didn't think I was concerned about the efficiencies of documents per se. I was actually looking at the BL versus the actual goods arriving and the quality of the goods arriving, right? And that's kind of like where DiMuto wanted to understand. It's not about where your goods are and who sends the goods, but it's actually the condition of the goods when it was packed and the condition of the goods when it arrived. If these 2 parts can be determined and we can form a consensus, that means, to your point earlier, if a government starts saying, to come into my country, you need to do this, then the next country will say the same thing. To go into his country, you need to do that.
But that's normal.
Yeah,
That's what we want to achieve, right?
But it becomes counterproductive because, for example, they will then.
I mean, Gary, today we have the rules, tariffs, quotas, food safety regulations, and many other things that regulates. And countries obviously have that rules. Why are we afraid of these rules?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that's why I'm just saying that the standard becomes, right. No matter how the rules get in, the information will still roughly be the same of the same rule, right? Even if you put tariffs, it must be the value of the cargo. What is the cargo? How much was the cargo? You put certain things. And
I mean, right? Just those things are acceptable for everyone, right?
Yes.
Why the technology of the blockchain, which brings benefits to people and to the government, shouldn't be scaled up? Now, with what Raymond says, that if Ethereum works at 95% of its capacity at the moment, then I think that there is a technology limitations at the moment. And that's a good point. I really want kind of to grab your attention on this point at the same time. So if we are moving into the full traceability globally, then at the moment we can't do that. But what Raymond says, and I'd like you to continue, is that there is a layer 2 and most probably layer 3 and layer 4 coming to help us to increase the scalability. So please continue.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, there are actually layer 2 solutions, right? Layer 2 are smart contract executing on layer 1. Layer 1 is actually the native node applications itself, right? You have Ethereum, you have Hyperledger, you have Bitcoin, you have so on and so forth. These are all layer 1. Layer 2 solutions are what we have in Ethereum right now. There are Cosmos, there are Plasmas that allow you to either 1, compress transaction like I've mentioned, or 2, actually have the state anchored in a separate blockchain and have the state guarantee anchored back to the main Ethereum blockchain. What this allows you to do is that on the secondary blockchain, you actually have the same level of guarantee in terms of its dollar cost security model. That is the same as the Ethereum, right? But what you do here is that you don't have it at the microsecond, the seconds level, right? What it does here is that every couple of minutes or epoch, right, or time period, we actually commit the state back to the original Ethereum blockchain. So this way, you have kind of a slightly larger window of error as compared to those in the original blockchain itself. And this is really helpful, right? Because like what Gary mentioned, when I'm moving millions of containers of cargoes along the world, I don't want to put millions of transactions onto the already burdened Ethereum network, right? What I want to do is that I want to be able to keep track of the state elsewhere, but yet have the guarantee of it on one that can never be reversed, right? While trading off a slightly larger period of time lag, right? Perhaps an hour, perhaps 10 minutes. And these are just layer 2 solutions. Beyond the layer 2 solutions, there right now are application layer solutions, right? As Gary has mentioned, he has tried out Trade Trust, right? Trade Trust allows you to create trade documentations, right? And the funny thing is that it's not new. Singapore has actually used it at a nationwide level, right? At our own examination board, SEAB, right? Back in 2009, we actually issued 40 years of education records for all the citizens in Singapore who have taken major examination like the GCE O-level and A-level. How do we do it without taking 40 years, right? By basically batching the records. Every single transaction that SEAB has put forth into the Ethereum blockchain actually comprises of up from 20,000 certificates, right? And that's the application level kind of model where I'm able to compress information or transactions down to a very single, a small transaction, and yet it has the ability to attest to thousands, tens of thousands, or even millions of records. And IoT data are not any different from this as well. We can compress all of this into a single transaction. So imagine as your cargo move, right? every single sensors are not directly interacting with the blockchain, right? It interacts with a central model, right, that's able to compress these transactions and later commit itself to the blockchain. In times of disputes later, right, let's say we go back to, was the cold chain broken, 3 days ago, 30 days ago? We can then fetch the record from this central repository, and this central repository can actually generate proofs that indeed the information has been committed 30 days ago, right? And there's no way for this to actually change the records. So that there are existing layer 2 solutions as well as application layer solutions. Now here's where something gets exciting. Ethereum is slow. We all acknowledge it, right? And it's one of the blockchain with the largest mind share, right? A lot of smart people, not me, are working on it, on the layer 1 solutions. And this is what we hope to see within the next 1 year, which is Ethereum 2.0, in which it moves from the model of a single global computer to a sharded global computer. Instead of every single node in the world having the global state stored and processed, it is taking a fragment of the total of the global state and corroborating the information with other nodes as well. So imagine, now instead of one single Ethereum that each one of us is running right now, right, you have all the records. When we talk about blockchain, we talk about records. You just think of it as like a book, right? You have the full book. He has the full book. I have the full book. Now, Ethereum 2 actually scales it by sharding it. By sharding, it means splitting and division, right? Now, if there is 3 shards in this blockchain, basically I'm taking the book and dividing it into 3 chapters. You take chapter 1, chapter 2, and I'm taking chapter 3. And basically, you do all the processing for chapter 1, he does it for chapter 2, I do it for chapter 3. And if, let's say, there's records from chapter 3 to chapter 2, basically, both of us work together to send the transaction over. And that's what's exciting about blockchain, because it continues to grow. And it grows at the rate of the developer mindshare of the entire world, not just a single company, but the entire world, because everyone wants to see it grow.
It's very exciting to go into the technology, and I'm sure there are many other things that we could have discussed, but I have one last question for both of you, and it's about one of the advantages of introducing blockchain into the traceability, and it's food fraud, which is a big issue in the world. Gary, how your solution helps to minimize the issue of the food fraud? In other words, many countries are really struggling with the protecting, I would say, authenticity of their productions. And it's also relevant to the companies. So how you address that issue?
Well, the way we approach the problem is like, it's really not kind of different from a lot of the usage. Most of the time, fraud is taken from how do you prevent it. I think the way we look at fraud is who was the one who put it, right? I mean, for example, if you say you did this and it came from there, what the blockchain could do is to really identify not just what was put up, but who put it up and when it was put up, right? So that's kind of like where we actually address the issue, right? Trying to say that you prevent it right from the source is one way to do it, but actually the end result is you get the ability to identify who was the one who did fraud. Now, when you get a system in our ecosystem, you could probably cheat once. Today, there are many black sheeps in the, you got many people selling fake apples that call different brands. Anybody can stick a Suncase orange there and call it a Suncase. And it's going out there in this market today. Nobody knows that. But you can't catch them. But when you start seeing that who puts it up, when it was put up, and you identify them, they can get it away one time, they may not get away the second time. So the way we approach in our system is to basically be able to not capture the fraud because this thing is able to show that this is it, but if someone did make a fraud, you are now able to confirm it. So that's sort of like a little bit of a different approach, because if we want to go where we heard earlier with Raymond's view of a lot of things, it's like there are many things that we can do and many layers, but from a business implementation or country implementation time, we got to be as agnostic about it. We can't say this is better or that is better. We need to basically be able to be a bit practical in our approach in getting the results we want. What is it that we really want is to make sure that we have the ability to know where our things are formed in such a way that you don't get fraud and you don't get basically people being cheated of certain things that they shouldn't be cheated out of. And so therefore for us is that apply the right amount of trust. If you want absolute trust, then maybe this is going to cost you a lot. And maybe the goods that you're moving has to be in relation to the trust that you want to achieve. So there is going to be a give and take. But the technology in itself not being applicable, I don't think so. I think you can apply it to the value of the goods. And then the cost of implementation is really in relation to your goods that you are trying to apply it to.
Actually, that's why I haven't mentioned absolute. I said minimize the food, and obviously your technology provides that solution. What would be the take of the public institution? Because yes, companies like DiMuto is working with the private sector operators, but the coverage is still limited. What would be your take? Is there I would say, a more wider technology with a wider coverage, like maybe an accounting system or anything like that can help?
I think I fully agree with what Gary has spoke about. But at the same time, I think from where I come from, accessibility is a big problem, right? We don't want to have people who can afford to pay for certain solutions to only have access to it. Such, for instance, right? We want it such that anyone who is interested, right, to be a member of this, right? If I'm a small player like what you mentioned, SMEs, right? How do I truly leverage on such technology without spending of millions of dollars, getting a auditor firm or project management firm just to create a blockchain project for me, right? We want to make this technology accessible, which is why we created Trade Trust, where we allow anyone and everyone, so long as they want to partake in this voluntarily, they could, right? And this upfront cost is minimal. You just have to spend time, set up your infrastructure, tie your identity up to your organization. And that actually allows you to be part of this ecosystem already. And that's a big thing. And you spoke about accounting, right? And this has something to do with accounting, because when we talk about accounting, one of the biggest innovation is actually double entry accounting, right?
That's fundamental, right?
Fundamental. Everyone who looked at a book before, it's going to tell you, every record in there, when you add a debit entry, you got to have a credit entry, right? For the longest time, this exists. But the problem with this is that it is good. It is good for you to discover if you have made any error on your books, right? It prevents kind of stupid mistake on your own ends, but it does not prevent fraud. So here's the thing. If today I want to make my book up, like let's say I'm a malicious startup, right? Just out here to eat venture capitalist funds. What I could do is that I could add entries that, business C, business D, business E has paid me $1 million each, in terms of royalty for the next 3 years, and I expense this somewhere else in inventory or assets, right? And it looks like on paper, right? I can tell people I'm a growth company, right? I grow at a rate of 50% year on year, and that's great to investors to hear. But what investors didn't know is that they don't know a few things. Number one, did those companies actually made a payment to you? All right? Did you make a payment to other companies? And are these other companies the ones that you said? If you said you paid for tuna, sashimis, or avocados, durians, did you actually pay a company that is exporting durian? Did you actually pay a company that is exporting tuna? Right? And when we look at this is a flaw in the double entry accounting system. Here's what blockchain brings you. When you have the people, being in this ecosystem, planted into it, we have a third entry. And this gives rise to a concept that people talk about is called the triple entry accounting. Other than the two entries that I have, right, where let's say I purchase something from you, I give you cash, I add to my assets, there's a third entry in which you receive cash, right? And that will allow us to actually trace, right, movements of cash, right? But if we change that a little, right, borrow the same concept from accounting and blockchain down to food traceability and blockchain, right? Basically, when I say I bought tuna, right, or Norwegian salmon, right, it got to come somewhere from the Norwegian region, right? And if it didn't, then I can't really call it the Norwegian salmon, right? And the blockchain actually allows you to have this third entry in which you are able to trace back the player where if I've gotten salmon, it must have came from somewhere. Can I prove that it came from somewhere? And Gary's method on how he combat this is basically game theorics, right? That yes, you can cheat someone once, but you can cheat him twice, right? But why the
So in a repeating game
in a
scenario,
repeating
you
game,
wouldn't cheat,
right?
yeah.
The first time you can cheat.
The part is Gary's way of doing it is that there's someone in Norway taking the picture of the salmon.
Correct. Yeah. And that
that's
is
one
important.
entry, right? So that's
very important.
That's how we do it.
But if still there is one company that keeps changing its name and just, I would say, playing unfairly into the game, they still have the chance to survive, right?
So this is also game theorics, right?
No, but then the truth of the matter is this the purpose of blockchain to prevent this one company to never have to cheat? I mean, if that...
No. I'm not saying that. I'm
So
just
that's
asking
just
the
very clear,
question.
because-
I'm asking the question.
so
No,
because
I think
yeah.
the whole thing, if we look at it from a game theoretical point of view, right, there's nothing stopping this company from changing his names, right? Let's say I'm the evil company, right? I'm always changing my name and I get fake honey and exporting to other countries, right? And getting people to worry about the supply of honey. Now, I'm the fake one. I'm always changing my name. Gary is actually operating a real bee farm, right? He's not adding sugar, he's not adding colors and faking lab tests, so on and so forth, right? What is going to happen 2 games down? By then, he would have 2 legit transactions, and me, none.
So I call him the black sheep and I'm the white sheep.
Right.
And in this world without blockchain, I could not have identified him as the black sheep.
Yep.
So
Because-
basically, blockchain brings to the partnership and collaboration.
Right.
That's right. Right. So
And
everything
you can build on your identity, right?
Yes.
Because he has 2 successful transactions now. He is able to go out and sell you honey, while I couldn't. You would be asking, you have not done honey before?
Or the next question is, are you on the blockchain? Why aren't your products on the blockchain?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, let's maybe finish on this very positive note. Thank you very much for joining us today. I think we had a fascinating discussion, and my conclusion of that discussion would be that blockchain technology really has great power of transforming the way that international trade is taking place. It can help us to increase efficiency of the entire system. And ultimately, it helps consumers to be more protected and SMEs to better integrate into the global value chains. So for those of you who wants to learn more fundamentals, stay with us with the second episode that will be basic explanations of the terms. Thank you very much and see you soon.